Hey everybody, welcome to Southridge. If this is your first time joining us in this format, we want to offer a few tips on how to make the most of this experience. We want you to participate from home, so actually sing along. You sound great. Musicians, the charts are available below the video, so play along. It's like a free Sunday morning music lesson. And if English isn't your first language or you experience hearing challenges, we encourage you to turn on the closed captioning on this video. You can also download the transcripts for this morning's message to help you follow along more easily. And if you haven't done so yet, be sure to download the Southridge app. This is the latest way to stay connected and informed about everything that's happening at Southridge. And it'll be one of your classier apps as well. Now, while we're glad that you've joined us online today, we want to remind you that every Sunday morning we gather in person as a church at our 3 Niagara locations. We believe that gathering in person is a superior experience to simply taking the service in online, and we'd love for you to join us when you're ready or if you're able. Now that said, we create this online experience as an accessible option for those of us who can't or aren't ready to be in person at this time. Still, we invite you to participate as if you're with us. While it's nice to be able to just sit back and watch from the comfort of your home, we want you to know that God's vision for our lives isn't about making us comfortable. And following Jesus isn't something that happens simply by passively observing. Our desire is that by joining us today, you'll feel stretched and challenged, the spiritual equivalent of going to the gym for a workout. What we do isn't always easy, but it's designed to strengthen and transform us more and more into God's image. So when this experience raises tough questions for you, we invite you to ask them. If it surfaces strong feelings, don't be afraid to feel them. And if you sense the Spirit of God speaking to you, lean in and listen. We believe that God wants to meaningfully connect with each of us. So do your very best to give God your full attention and wholly immerse yourself in these next moments as we approach the God who made us and loves us with a posture of curiosity, openness, and honesty. Now, as we begin our time together, wherever and whenever you are, whether this is your first time with us or if you've been around forever, we hope that you know you're among friends and you belong. Welcome to Southridge. We're glad you're here.
Hey, I really hope that you've had a great week, and even if not, I'm so glad you found your way here with us today. But before we get started, I want to invite you to reflect back on your week. If I were to ask you how it was, what would you say? Was it good? Challenging? I wonder how many of us would use the word busy to describe life these days. So before we go any further, let's take a moment to just take a few breaths and do nothing. Maybe you want to close your eyes and just try to be present to yourself in this moment. If you're at all like me, life has a way of taking over. And it often feels like there just aren't enough hours in the day or the week to get everything that needs to be done. If that feels like you, I want to remind us both today that life was never meant to feel like that, at least not from God's perspective. You know, we often pay very little attention to the condition of our soul, but God sees you deeply and cares about even the pressures of your life. And more than that, God is inviting you to press pause on all that hurry and hustle to experience genuine rest and recovery. Listen to these words of invitation from Jesus. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn how to live freely and lightly. I want to read those words again, but before I do, I just want to invite you to consider your posture right now. I want to invite you to put down anything you might be holding in your hands, phones included. Sit comfortably upright in your chair with your hands on your lap and plant your feet on the ground. Now just take a few deep breaths again. Try to relax the muscles in your face. And relax your shoulders. Finally, relax your chest and your stomach. Now, holding this relaxed posture, listen to these words again as I read them more slowly. Are you tired? Worn out? Burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Now let's try to enter into worship from this posture.
You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. And great are you, Lord. And it's your
I want to read a poem to you called Blessing in the Chaos by Jan Richardson. And then following that, we're actually just going to sit for a few minutes and gaze at some gorgeous nature. We're just going to drink it in. We often fill this space with a lot of words and a lot of thoughts. And in that, sometimes we can miss the presence and the beauty of God, so often found more deeply in silence, in stillness, in the quiet spaces. And we don't want to miss that today. So to be clear, there's nothing for you to do here, nothing to accomplish in these moments. There's no specific goal, and you don't need to try to achieve some special union experience. You just let your body, your soul, and your spirit take some deep breaths, knowing that they probably need them. So, blessing in the chaos. To all that is chaotic in you, let there come silence. Let there be a calming of the clamoring, a stilling of the voices that have laid their claim on you, that have made their home in you, that go with you even to the holy places, but will not let you rest, will not let you hear your life with wholeness, or feel the grace that fashioned you. Let what distracts you cease. Let what divides you cease. Let there come an end to what diminishes and demeans, and let depart all that keeps you in its cage. Let there be an opening into the quiet that lies beneath the chaos, where you will find the peace you did not think possible, and see what shimmers within the storm.
be still, for I am with you. Peace be still, for I am your God. Peace be still, the battle is not yours. Peace be still, for I am in control. Bring your tears, bring your pain, bring your fears, this truth will remain. Peace be still, for I am in control. Peace be still, for I am your constant. Peace be still, for I am on the throne. In this time of uncertainty, quiet your soul and come rest in me. Peace be still, for I am on the throne. Peace be still, I will never leave you. Peace be still, for I won't let you go. Though all hell rages and roars, I am your shield, your shelter in storm. Peace be still, for I am your God. Peace be still, for I am your God. Display for all to see. You are light when the darkness closes in. You are hope, you are hope. You have covered all my sin. You are peace when my fear is crippling. You are true, even in my wandering. You are joy, you're the reason that I sing. You are life, in you death has lost its sting. And oh, I'm running to your arms, I'm running to your arms. The riches of your love will always be enough. Nothing compares to your embrace. Light of the world, forever reign. You are more than my words will ever say. You are Lord, Let's sing this together. My heart will sing, no other name, Jesus, Jesus. My heart will sing, no other name, Jesus, Jesus. My heart will sing, no other name, Jesus, Jesus. My heart will sing, no other name, Jesus, and no, I'm running to your arms. I'm running to your arms. The riches of your love will always be enough. Nothing compares to your embrace. Light of the world, forever reign. I'm running to your arms. I'm running to your arms. The riches of your love will always be enough. Nothing compares to your embrace. Light of the world, forever reign. My heart will sing, no other name, Jesus, Jesus. My heart will sing, no other name, Jesus, Jesus.
Hey there, my name is Rick, and I serve as the location pastor here at Southridge. We're so glad you're participating with us this week, and we hope this has already been a meaningful experience for you. I'm standing right here in our Vineland location, and if you've never joined us for one of our in-person gatherings at one of our physical Southridge locations, we invite you and would love to have you consider joining us in person when you feel ready and able. While we're so grateful to have this online platform to share in this experience from wherever and whenever we find ourselves, we love it even more when we can be together in person and embrace the magic of community. So please know that you are welcome to join us on any Sunday in person, and we will strive to quickly help you know that you belong. Especially if you've ever felt excluded or ignored by the church, we'd love the chance to change your experience and let you know that you're loved, accepted, and welcomed with us. In fact, if you happen to live in the Lincoln area, I'd love to personally invite you to our location and would be thrilled to have a chance to meet you if you decide to join us. And if you live anywhere near the other locations, I know that you'll find the same welcome there at those locations too. Now, for any of you who are brand new to all this and maybe participating with us online for the very first time, we definitely want to say a special welcome to you. It's good to meet you, so to speak, even through the screen. And we're so glad you've chosen to check us out. We hope you feel like you're among friends and family, even in this format. As our way of saying thanks for joining us for your first time, we'd love to give you a gift of our Southridge Jam from our social enterprise, the Southridge Jam Company. If you click on the New Here or Gift button below and share your contact information, we'll be in touch and safely deliver a gift of the Southridge Jam to you this week. Similarly, if you're looking for a way to get in touch with us, meet with a pastor, ask questions, get baptized, or learn how to get more involved in our community, please take a moment to fill out the Connect card on our website or app, and we'll be in touch shortly this week. Now we want to transition into this week's talk. And as we prepare to hear together, we invite you to remove as many distractions as possible and listen into what God might want to be saying uniquely to you. We're so glad that you've joined us, and we look forward to growing together.
Well, I wonder for how many of us this commandment that we're going to look at today is perceived as the weirdest one of all. And I wonder that because, the first 3 commandments that we've already looked at have this direct relation to how we interact with God. And then whether you know this or not, the next 6 commandments that we're going to look at in the new year have direct relationship to how we interact with other people. And they're kind of simple and straightforward and easy to understand. But, today's commandment is kind of the pivot commandment, to use some popular language. And it applies in a way that maybe some of us are kind of uncertain, because today's commandment is, of all things, to observe the Sabbath. That's what we're talking about today. Taking a day off is actually a 10 commandment level deal. And before you wonder why, let's appreciate the fullness of this from the Bible's perspective, because in the scriptures, it's like a huge deal. Later on in the book of Exodus, in fact, it describes violating the 10 commandments, and especially violating this particular Sabbath-keeping commandment as death penalty worthy. Can you imagine 2 death row inmates, one saying to the other, "What are you in here for?" "Well, murder." "What about you?" "Oh, I skipped a Sunday off." I mean, it feels kind of ridiculous, or maybe over extreme. And even in the New Testament, we see churches and groups of Jesus followers, like in the book of Romans, for example, we've talked about this before, who are on the verge of splitting over arguing about whether or not, as followers of Jesus, you have to still observe the Sabbath. I mean, in a world like ours, things are pretty polarized these days. And I wonder if we could ever imagine, of all of the vaccine arguments or things that we divide over these days, if we could ever imagine people arguing over whether you need to take a day off or not. And I know for some of us, we might actually have to not imagine, because we were around back on June 3rd in 1992, where the provincial government finally relinquished an 85-year-old law in our province that was the very beginning of what we referred to back then as Sunday shopping. Was actually the product of a national law that had been rescinded in 1985 called the Lord's Day Act. It was the Federal Lord's Day Act. It was rescinded in 1985, and then it took some 7 extra years before it got rescinded in Ontario. And in that period of time, if you were alive and around the conversation in our society, and especially maybe in the church, even in churches like ours, you know that this was a hotly contested issue of whether you could work on Sundays or shop on Sundays, which by definition caused other people to work, or whether you could commit the most heinous offense, playing sports on Sundays. And so I wonder, for some of us, if we wonder what the big deal is, because in our culture, it doesn't really seem to be that big a deal today, although a generation ago it was a huge deal. And in the scriptures, it seems like at some level, it's a life or death level deal. So what's the big deal? Why is observing a Sabbath 10 commandment level worthy? Well, that's what we're going to look at today in Exodus chapter 20. And in the passage we're going to study in this 4th commandment, in this first half of the 10 commandments that we're going to look at, the passage is broken down into 3 chunks. There's kind of the statement of command, and then there's the specificity or the description of what the command kind of looks like, and then there's the rationale for it. There's the statement, the specificity, and then the rationale for it. And so beginning in verse 8, we're going to take a look, first of all, just at the statement itself, where it says there, "Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy." Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. That's the 4th commandment in the 10 commandments. And when we're referring to this word Sabbath, if you're not familiar from a faith or from a church perspective, the word Sabbath literally means to cease. And so a Sabbath day is a day of ceasing all of the regular things that you would do on all of the other days. Okay, quite simple. And to remember it, the verse says to remember it. This isn't just like a cognitive, activation of our memories, like you're recalling a phone number. To remember it is an active observance of the Sabbath for the entire duration of the day. And when you do that, the passage says it keeps it holy. You observe the Sabbath by keeping it holy. The word holy, we've already studied in this series, is to set apart or to be set apart. And appreciating that in Israel's time, they were the only nation or people to observe a law like this. That certainly would have distinguished them from the cultures and societies and nations around them. And so the commandment is simply to remember or observe the ceasing activity for an entire day in order to be set apart or to treat a day set apart in this way. And so getting to the specificity then in the next verse, in verse 9, it says this: 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. And in the specificity, I want us to just kind of pick out two key ideas. The first is to observe the cyclical nature of the Sabbath keeping law. It wasn't just a one-off thing that you were supposed to obey, once in a while or once in your life. It was actually part of a larger rhythm where you would get all your work done for 6 days and then cease work for 1 day, and then do all of your work for 6 days, and again, take a day off for 1 day, and work for 6, and day off for 6, almost like inhaling and exhaling, like the rhythm of breathing. It was a rhythmical kind of a thing, week in and week out. It wasn't just a one-off day. The other thing I want us to observe is how egalitarian this law is, meaning how it applied to absolutely everything and everybody, no matter what your class or kind of status in society. The law applied to everyone in every situation, which meant that you couldn't just make an excuse that you couldn't observe it because, the boss called you in sick. This applied both to you and the boss who was calling you into work. And so you couldn't say that you couldn't observe the Sabbath because someone else gave you this excuse. It applied to everybody equally. I once heard someone describe this as the emergency brake on the exploitation of people, right? It was a kind of a way to push back against oppressing other people because it applied in a full and complete way to absolutely everybody equally. So if you're wondering, what the reason behind this was, it's described then at the end of this section in verse 11 of Exodus 20, when it says this. It says, for, or because, in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. This is obviously referring to the creation narrative in the first couple chapters of the Bible, in the book of Genesis. And in this rationale, there are two things that I want us to notice. The first is that one of the reasons to observe the Sabbath is because it's part of God's created order. It's part of the way that he designed the world, and especially his prized creation in humanity, to live and to work. And so observing a Sabbath is part of the way God made us. Observing the Sabbath is part of what it means to be fully human. At the same time, notice that in this creation narrative, it actually refers to the behavior, to the very nature of God as well. And so it's not just being fully human, it's also in mirroring the image of God, or living out God's image-bearing qualities in our lives, that we observe it to be, in that sense, godlike, or to be fully alive. It's actually of God for you and I to observe this Sabbath day as a regular rhythm and to experience this rhythmic rest of God in our lives as well. At the end of the day, that's what the Sabbath is intended to do and to be for you and I, not just to mirror what God does, but to adopt who God is and to live out his rhythmic restfulness in our lives. The Sabbath is a gift of God's rhythmic restfulness to you and to me. And in that sense, I hope that we can appreciate that the whole design of the Sabbath is not just this rule to obey, to oppress or repress us. It's not restrictive, it's promotive. It's something that God intends to be for us, not against us, which is something Jesus affirmed in Mark chapter 2. He says in verse 27 that the Sabbath was made for man or for people, not people for the Sabbath. The Sabbath, in living out and embracing God's rhythmic restfulness, is ultimately something that's to bring us life and to allow us to experience the fullness of life, the fullness of what it means to be godlike, and the fullness of what it means to be human, not to rob or restrict us from the very best of life. You might not fully appreciate this. I didn't for some time until I started to understand this from an athletic perspective at first, back when I was in high school. I've told this story before, but it's worth repeating. When a couple of twins transferred to our school and started to train with our long distance running group. And when they transferred to our school, we met with them and they wanted to know what our kind of training program was like. And so I walked them through the different days that we did workouts and the different days that we did recovery runs. And then I explained to them that every single Friday we took the day off. And when I shared that with them, they had this look of like horror and indignation, wondering why it was that we took a day off. And I didn't really have an answer for them. In fact, I didn't really know why they were even asking the question in the first place, until they started to help me understand that to take a day off every week actually added up over the course of a calendar year to 52 days off running every year. They looked at me and they said, do you not realize that that's 7.5 weeks of no running? How are you going to get better and develop as an athlete if you're just going to forfeit running and training for 7.5 weeks a year? And I never really thought about that before. And so that evening I called my coach and I asked him, I said, why do we take Fridays off? He said, what do you mean? And I explained this math and this logic that these twins had kind of walked me through. And I said, how do you feel about us taking 7.5 weeks off a year? How are we going to get better if we're forfeiting 7.5 weeks of running and training? He said, but I don't look at it that way. This was the game-changing response. He said, I don't look at it that way. He said, I don't see it as 7.5 weeks of no training. I actually see it as 52 weeks of good training, 52 weeks of healthy training, because he helped me understand the complementary nature of stress and rest in growth and human development. And at the end of the day, that's what we've got to understand about God's design for our lives, that our flourishing and our health is the product of a rhythm of stress and rest. The equation is that growth or health equals stress plus rest, not just stress plus more stress on top of more stress. That leads to a burnt out, worn down version of ourselves. And we think about the context of where this commandment sits in the 10 Commandments and what the 10 Commandments ultimately are, which Mike did a really good job a few weeks ago of walking us through. The 10 Commandments are not just some random rules to obey to restrict us of a quality of life. The 10 Commandments are the terms of a covenant relationship that God wanted to establish with people. They're the terms of what it means to live in this reciprocal relationship of love with God. And it shouldn't surprise us then that one of the terms of living out this reciprocal relationship of love with God would be experiencing the rhythmic routine of his restfulness, because that rest on top of all the days of work and on top of all the stress in our lives allows us to be the best version of ourselves. How can you live out a covenant relationship of love well if you're in the worst, most burnt out, most worn down place? The whole idea is to be the best version of yourself. That's why the Sabbath is part of the 10 Commandments and one of the terms of this covenant relationship that we have with God. And so as we think about that, as we capture that vision for what the Sabbath-keeping law is ultimately intended to be in our lives today, it makes us wonder why it's so hard for some of us to live out. I know for many of us, we find this profusely frustrating. Maybe, first things first, because the Bible is very nondescript about how practically to actually live this out. The Bible says to observe the Sabbath, even says that it's like death penalty worthy if you don't. But it never gives a whole lot of description on what a Sabbath is to look like. And some of us are just plagued with guilt in how we try to organize and experience the Sabbath. And it can become just this experience of frustration and failure again and again, especially when you take into account the humanness of our lives. The fact that life happens and many of us have all kinds of other responsibilities, even for other people. And of course, when other circumstances are thrown on us or crisis kind of stares us in the face and we can't control things, it becomes exponentially more difficult to live out a Sabbath in a real life, regular routine. And so if you're wondering at a practical level how to do this, I'd actually encourage you to look at the other passage in the Old Testament that lays out the 10 Commandments, not in Exodus chapter 20, but in Deuteronomy chapter 5, where it uses this word that I think gives us a practical clue on how to observe the Sabbath in our day, because it refers to guarding the Sabbath. It uses the word guarding to describe how Sabbath keeping happens. And I think if we're looking to guard the Sabbath, in a way for my own life that has just been experienced through, nothing more spiritual than trial and error, I think that there are 4 practical steps that we can all take today. So if you're taking notes, you can quickly write these down. Because I think, number 1, to guard a regular Sabbath requires being proactive in designating in the first place. In English, book it into your calendar first. Book the day off so that it's not blank and can kind of give you the impression that other things can book in. Make it booked from the beginning. And for those of you, I've talked to a few of you lately who are to-do list people, actively make a separate to-do list for the Sabbath that you're designating so that you're doing different things and ceasing doing those other things. If you don't book it in from the beginning, it's going to get engulfed with other things, which kind of leads us to step number 2, and that is to reassign our other responsibilities, our ordinary everyday things that we're supposed to cease on the Sabbath, reassign those to the other 6 days. Jeff Mannion was super helpful in helping us understand this a few years ago, because he conceded that in his own journey of discovering Sabbath, if you reduce your Sabbath to all of the errands and yard work and car services and dentist appointments that you typically do, oftentimes you're going to be more busy and run more ragged at the end of your Sabbath than you are in those other work days, and it kind of defeats the purpose. So we've got to be really disciplined to organize those things in the different spaces of lunches and after works and whatever of the other days of our week, so that we can create the space to, number 3, to embrace the value of rest and replenishment. Once we've done the discipline of carving out a Sabbath and reassigning our other responsibilities, we've got to give ourselves the permission to just be off, to not be productive, to not need to be defined by you are what you do, and to allow ourselves to be relieved from all the guilt. I know that there are some of us, because I've talked to you, there are some of us who literally cannot allow ourselves to sleep in because we get too guilt-ridden. Even though we've said before, quoting some wise spiritual formation guides and pastors that have said sometimes the most spiritually significant step that we can take in our growth in following Jesus is to take a nap. Right? The importance of rest and replenishment needs to be embraced in that health and vitality is stress plus rest, so that we can overcome the guilt of carving out a day where we just chill and essentially do nothing. And then if we can do that, I think number 4, to get real practical, simply fill the day with what fills you. Simply fill the day with what fills you. The person who's going to be the expert on what is life-giving to you is you as the expert of your life. So if you like being outdoors or like working out or exercising, then give that a try on your Sabbath. If you like being indoors or doing other activities, cooking or reading, well, give that a shot. If being away from people is energizing to you, then enjoy some alone time. If being with people is life-giving, especially certain people, then book appointments and spend time with them and enjoy them. There's no right or wrong to what it means to enjoy a good Sabbath, other than to ceasing to do those regular things and simply allow your soul to be refreshed and recharged and filled. Remember that the expert on your self-care is yourself. On top of that, if you needed any other reason to embrace the regular rhythm of God's restfulness, I would actually encourage you to go to that second passage in the Old Testament that again refers to the 10 Commandments in Deuteronomy chapter 5, because when it talks about this 4th commandment of Sabbath keeping, it doesn't just provide the command and the specificity and the rationale like we looked at in Exodus chapter 20. It actually makes one more comment on top of that. At the end of the section, in verse 15, it says this: remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. See, in Israel's original context, the Sabbath also served as a reminder that they were no longer under Egyptian slavery anymore. The freedom to not work, the freedom to enjoy God's rhythm of restfulness was a gift to them to remind them that they were no longer slaves. And I wonder, for those of us who find it impossible to get off the treadmill or the hamster wheel of our everyday life and routine, what it's going to take for us to finally carve out a day where we can just enjoy God's rest and replenishment the way that his nature and his design of us was meant to enjoy it. I wonder if we can capture that idea, that this was meant to remind us that we're actually not slaves anymore. And it kind of begs the question of which voice we're allowing to most influence our lives. In fact, the other day, Mike sent me a tweet. You can see it at the bottom of the screen, where someone tweeted these two different voices: the voice of Pharaoh that says, "Get back to your work," and the voice of Jesus that says, "I will give you rest." Whose voice are you allowing to define your life? You know, we might have started this conversation thinking that it's pretty bizarre that taking a day off would be considered like 10th commandment worthy, especially when you consider that the punishment for not observing that commandment is the death penalty. But I wonder if we're honest with ourselves and we think about the times where we most violate that in our own lives, and we most succumb to the treadmill and the hamster wheel and the oppression of just work and stress on top of it. And we consider what our life is like in those seasons. Maybe even right now, in our most worn down, burnt out, exhausted, depleted, irritable, uncaring, impatient version of ourselves. I wonder whether we haven't, without knowing it, been kind of assigning a death penalty of sorts on our own lives by continually choosing to rob ourselves of the full vitality of the way that God intended us to experience and enjoy life. Have we been assigning our own death penalty by refusing to embrace the gift that Sabbath is intended to be for us, a gift that is intended to be for us, not against us? That's what we've got to remember when it comes to observing this command. And then beyond that, to appreciate that it's about more than just us. We titled this morning in this series, Prioritizing Love, because in living out the terms of that covenant relationship that God intends to have with us, that mutual reciprocity where we live out his vision of loving him and loving others, what better way to love God with all of our heart and all of our soul and all of our mind and all of our strength, and to fully, effectively love other people as ourselves, than to bring the very best version of ourselves through what Sabbath provides. That's the gift of Sabbath. It's for you, but it's for way more, because the gift of Sabbath is ultimately for love. That's why observing God's rhythmic restfulness in the Sabbath day matters so much. Let's close in this prayer together. Let's pray.
God of holy rest, on the seventh day you paused, laying down the work of creation, and entered into sacred stillness. Let us remember we were freed from slavery in Egypt, and you called us to be people of liberation. Kindle in us the strength to say no to a world of perpetual busyness. Inspire us to set aside all of our plans and goals to receive the lavish gift of rest for ourselves. Let the Sabbath be a time of profound renewal, of intimate connection with you, and a rekindling of our holy desires to be of service. Sustain in us the desire to simply be and not succumb to the demands of productivity and an endless string of achievements. Let our lives be a loving witness to a world of restoration and refreshment, of the profound goodness of joy and delight, taking pleasure in the generous gift of pausing.
Well, as Jeff said, preparing to rest for an entire day each week actually requires advanced planning work. So lest these all just become great thoughts that don't get implemented in our real lives, we want to give you a chance to start that intentional planning right now. So if you have a smartphone, you can scan the QR code on the screen right now, or open up the Southridge app. You can click the Sabbath planning button at the top there to get a fillable form if that's helpful for you. Otherwise, you can just follow along with the questions I'm going to ask you, think your answers, and then maybe go back to that form later today if you want. So first up, the easy one. What is a consistent day every week that you really could designate as a Sabbath? Now, what works in the rhythm of your life most often? Take a minute to just try to figure that out right now. Next question. Jeff talked about both the need to reassign other responsibilities, yard work and errands, home type work, as well as the need to truly value rest and refreshment. So let's combine both of those thoughts into this one question. Being very honest with yourself. What is most likely going to get in the way of you practicing Sabbath? Now, what are your personal obstacles or resistances likely going to be? And last but definitely not least, what kind of Sabbath activities are most likely to fill you? What brings you joy? What leads you to life? What feels like good rest? How do you most enjoy connecting with God and with people around you? Start to just make a quick list of what some of those soul-filling Sabbath activities might be for you right now. Okay, so this is a really good start, but it's only a start in terms of truly practicing Sabbath. So this week, like every other week, we've created a daily spiritual practice resource available to help you take everything we've talked about this morning and just help it become more of a lived reality in your daily experience. So this week, every practice is actually designed to build on the concept of Sabbath resting. So don't miss that if you, like me, could use a lot more practice on this one. So you can download that from the online service page, from the Spiritual Practices tab on our website, or if you subscribe to the Spiritual Practice notifications in the Southridge app, you'll get them delivered straight to your device every morning. So now, once again, let's offer our wholehearted worship to the God who loves us so much. He commands us to rest already. So rest.
Wherever or whenever you may find yourself taking this in, I invite you to sing to the one who is our guide, our provider, and our shepherd.
There is a field, you have led me there, and you revealed a peace that runs much deeper than I know. You give me rest, guide me down the roads that lead to truth, and I'm made whole when I'm running after you. You are my shepherd, I have all I want. You are with me, leading me on. You are the rock that I'm built upon. You are my shepherd, you're all I want.
There is a table you have set for me to lay down pride and offer the same grace that I've received. Surely goodness, mercy, love will follow me for all my days and for all eternity.
Oh, you are my shepherd, I have all I want. You are with me, leading me on. You are the rock that I'm built upon. You are my shepherd, you're all I want. You don't leave me where you find me. You're guiding me through as I stumble in this valley. I hold on to you. You don't leave me where you find me. You're guiding me through, and as I stumble in this valley, I hold on to you. You don't leave me where you find me, guiding me through, and as I stumble in this valley, I hold on to you. You don't leave me where you find me, you're guiding me through, and as I stumble in this valley, I hold on to you. 'Cause you are my shepherd, I have all I want, and you are with me, leading me on. You are the rock that I'm built upon. You are my shepherd, and you're all I want. You are my shepherd, and you're all I want. Oh, you are my shepherd, and you're all I want. You're all I want. I come and I confess, bowing here I find my rest. Without you I fall apart. You're the one that guides my heart. Sing, Lord, I need you. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. Where sin runs deep, your grace is more. Where grace is found is where you are. And where you are, Lord, I am free. Holiness is Christ in me. Oh, and Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. So teach my song to rise to you. When temptation comes my way, when I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. Teach my song. So teach my song to rise to you. When temptation comes my way, when I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. My one defense, you are my one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. Oh, how I need you, Lord. You're my only hope. You're my only friend. So I will wait for you. Come and rescue me. Come and give me life. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you.
Well, thanks for joining us today. We hope that you felt inspired and challenged by our time together. Now, we know that for what you've heard today to become reality in our daily lives, it's going to take more than this 1 hour a week we spend together. It requires a moment-by-moment, 7 days a week commitment to practicing the way of peace and the way of Jesus. We've got some specific ways for you to continue to lean into God's presence while we're away from each other. You can click on the Practice This Week button below the player for daily spiritual exercises to continue to develop the muscles we've started building today. You can also opt into the Spiritual Practices notification on our app to get those helpful reminders every morning as you start your days. As our time together ends, we're going to put some questions on the screen. And if you're watching with others, they can serve as a great conversation starter, but they can also be a great way of processing and personalizing what you've heard today on your own, so it's not immediately lost in the shuffle of the day. And if you'd like a more personal conversation with somebody about anything that's going on in your life, we invite you to reach out to our location pastors who will follow up with you privately. Simply go to southridgechurch.ca/contact. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for joining us and have a great week.